Hello and welcome to the GROGPOD Roguelike Podcast Summer Music Special. This is a show about roguelike games of all shapes and sizes, and this week we're focusing in on the oft-overlooked background music of this genre. We have a wide diversity of stuff to listen to today, from the biggest budget games to the smallest solo dev projects. But first, let's continue to listen in on our opening track. Wow, what a way to start our summer roguelike music fest. You're listening to Tides of the Foscari, composed by Danielle Zandara, with solo violin performance by Camilla D'Onofrio, performed by the Budapest Scoring Symphony Orchestra, all for the, you guessed it, $5 indie game Vampire Survivors. I am your conductor of this episode, Scott Berger. And joining me in the orchestra chamber pit are my co-hosts.
Hey, it's Andrew Harshman, and boy, I just am a music lover, and I think that my few years of taking piano as a kid are really going to serve me well, discussing music in a way that is very scientific and specific. And of course, also we have
Colin, I'm a sad trumpet noise used for comedic effect.
Oh, but we're missing someone.
Yes, this was the optional attendance episode for my co-hosts, where the intent was to give the co-hosts, a summer break episode. Let them sit at the beach, get a good tan going. That's where I'm assuming our good buddy Will is at the moment, missing out on all the good tunes. But yeah, normally for these episodes, this is where we pick a roguelike or roguelite game and talk about it, and then rank it for selection in the Omega Bowl at the end of the season. But for our summer break special episode, we're focusing in on the music of roguelike games. What better way to do it in an audio podcast format? We've talked a lot about indie games here, but we haven't really had an opportunity to do a music showcase. So what we'll be doing here is, I guess also to be clear, like we can't play all of these songs in total, because then this podcast will take like 5 hours to play through or whatever. But
also, hopefully you hear this and we're not stricken from the record for copyright infringement.
Don't worry, we'll find all sorts of copyright ways to get around. This is fair use, right? We're providing criticism of it, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So yeah, we'll be playing just a little teaser clip and be talking over some of it as well. But we'll be putting all of these up in a playlist on YouTube. If you hate the sound of our voices and just want to listen to the tunes, you have that option as well. Check out the show notes for that. But yeah, we have all sorts of stuff to listen through. I did put a call out to the listeners to submit stuff for us to pick through, and we were just like completely overwhelmed with options, I think. So I feel like this format of a show could be revisited in the future as well. So yeah, I think the listeners came through quite well. A lot of stuff we couldn't get to, a lot of terrible cuts had to be made, but I think we have a good mixtape going for tonight. and we have quite the range here. We have big budget orchestrations like we've just heard. We have solo compositions made by the same dev who self-programmed their own game. We have everything from metal, funk, and everything in between. So we've got quite the packed agenda for today. Some honorable mentions that didn't make the cut that we for sure check out these game soundtracks and these games as well. All these games are great, I should say, but their soundtracks especially. But we had some listeners write in with requests for us to cover Tangle Deep, RoboQuest, Rogue Legacy 2, Dicey Dungeons, Chrono Arc, and I mean the list just goes on. Like there's just too many things for us to play here. So I guess without further ado, let's kick off this beach party here with something that I really think when you think video game music, especially with this genre, you really can't go wrong with what we're about to play here to kick us off outside of our intro segment with a little game called Crypt of the Necrodancer. And this is the Disco Descent Stage 1, Floor 1 for Crypt of the Necrodancer. You're listening to Disco Descent Stage 1, Floor 1 of Crypt of the Necrodancer by Danny Baranowski. And wow, if I couldn't think of a game more inseparable from its music, it would maybe be this one, because I have my note here. The game is the music. We haven't covered this game quite yet. Stay tuned for sure. But
yeah,
Colin, you probably have the most experience between Andrew and I with this game.
No, I have not played it.
Okay.
But
I played it a bit.
But I have watched the Steam page intro cinematic, so I do know what the gameplay looks like. And I guess I hadn't really paid attention to the music quite as much as I have just sitting and listening to it. But yeah, you can almost feel how the beat influences the gameplay. It's very driving, and especially the intro beginning of it. Yeah, you can feel the rhythm of the gameplay pushing the song and the song pushing the gameplay.
And I guess for clarity, this is a game where you are hopping from tile to tile on the beat, and you have to attack on the beat, and the monsters attack on the beat. It's so much this is a game. one of our listeners wrote in and said about video game music that they always turn the video game music off, never listen to it, which to some degree I can understand, because you're on the couch, you're watching the news, you're on the bus, you don't want to bug everybody. But this is a game you have to play with the soundtrack, if nothing else because it's so ripping. But it is tightly ingrained, and I love the you're hopping around, in the dungeons, you come across the shopkeeper, and the shopkeeper is also singing the
Yes.
song. So great. Okay.
It's too good. It's too good. Oh, but sorry, real quick. I need to bring everyone's attention. There's a comment here saying that somebody who works in an emergency room thinks of this song and this beat in order to perform CPR correctly with the correct timing. It's like, oh wow, what a deal. But yeah, this is definitely a rhythm-based game, and we will be covering it soon enough, I'm sure. Exciting.
Okay, without further ado, our next track we have here is from our previous episode, The Last Spell. This one is Distant Memories. You're listening to Distant Memories by the French musician The Algorithm, Remy Gallego, for our previous episode, The Last Spell. I love this track. I think this track is just like, it's so like dark and foreboding with its metalness, but not like overbearing. It just has the perfect amount of mood to it, where our other previous episode, very metal heavy, Nightmare Reaper, I felt was like too like power chordy with its metal, of just like, you know, just like pounding it all the time, and there's no real letting the music kind of breathe. Almost this feels like fine wine metal in a way, where it's so textured and rich, and really I think helps bring out like the horror elements of this game.
I was laughing to myself because as soon as this song started playing, I felt like I was back in the war playing the game, and I immediately started like scowling and putting my hand to my chin, thinking, all right, what's the next move to make? Yeah, it's one of those, it's a great example of a song that has metal sensibilities and metal structures without necessarily containing some of the, you know, actual literal instruments that are
some good metal harpsichord.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's outstanding. Of course, the opening, the main title track of The Last Spell gets kind of talked a whole lot about and kind of steals the spotlight, but really all the music in this game is outstanding.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the best soundtracks of any of the games we've played. I say hands down. It is weird in that in some ways it's not the it's almost too good for the kind of gameplay. Like I feel like I want to be like actually in there hacking and slashing when I'm listening to this, and then I'm like, okay, no, but I actually do need to stop and scratch my beard for a lot longer than like it makes me want to like go fast, which is not necessarily the way you want to play the game. But
Yeah,
it
that is
is
kind of a funny juxtaposition, definitely.
but it is like thinking back, it is how it feels to remember playing the game, running around, slashing dudes, exploding them with magic, etc.
Well, we couldn't have a diversion about metal and roguelikes without a game that is maybe one of the most metal roguelikes and possibly one of like, a top three of games that people mention in this genre. Maybe you've heard of it. It's called Hades. If you can turn over a rock and find it. This next track is The Unseen Ones from Hades. You are listening to The Unseen Ones from Hades, composed by Darren Korb, featuring Masahiro Aoki and Daisuke Kurosawa. Aoki being noted for being the composer for Street Fighter V, No Straight Roads, and Bayonetta 3. I couldn't find anything about Kurosawa, but this is, whoa, for a game that has quite a bit of shredding, quite a bit of metal in it, the most shredding, the most metal one, and maybe spoiler alert for a little later in the game, but something that's not like front and center. Like this is something you have to work hard to get to, and I feel like this is something that really rewards you with like a proper, ultimate, super, ultra awesome final boss fight of just whoa, like I couldn't think of a better way to really shred it to end it.
Reddit to end it. Yeah. I like it. I was curious to listen to this song because it's been a while since I played Hades, and I didn't immediately recognize this song, but I'm reading some comments here, and I guess it's towards the end of the game, so good on them to hold on to such a nice little gem of music. Now, oftentimes when I go to a metal show and the singer needs to take a break and the musicians get to, really, really show off. Sometimes when those segments go a little long and they're noodling and noodling and noodling and widdly widdly wah, and just sometimes it gets a little exhausting. It's like, all right, we get it, we got it. You're amazing. You've mastered your craft. You're better at this, better than I will ever be at anything else. And but the context with which this showing off music and really like intense balls to the wall track is pretty appropriate, since it happens towards like the very end of the game. So I feel like it's one of the most appropriate uses of this music, if not the most appropriate.
I do like that it incorporates all of the, or not all, but it does incorporate themes from the main tracks, and like it's a metal version of the Hades soundtrack, but it incorporates motifs from other parts of the soundtrack, so it's not entirely disconnected from the slightly less metal parts of the rest of the soundtrack.
Oh, interesting. See, I didn't pick up on that. That is nice. Good stuff. Well played.
And to be clear, this is the final boss fight of the game, and moreover, this is the final boss fight of the game when you turn on an extra modifier to make the game substantially harder. So there's an option that allows you to
Well, no wonder I didn't recognize it. I'm not good enough to have gotten to that.
I mean, I haven't even 80 hours of gameplay for me in Hades. Like, I haven't gotten to that point yet. And I listened to this, I'm like, man, I really should go back and do that.
Yeah,
the boss fight music for that is so on point that this is like tantalizing me to go into that like super boss fight. I'm like, yeah, I want to see what, like, if the music for the normal boss fight compared to this, like this being so much shreddier, that boss fight has just got to be so much crazier. So I'd be excited to check that out just from the music. All right, well, moving on to a different kind of, we're moving from metal to death metal to more death, and we're jumping into our next song here from Doom the Roguelike, Unholy Cathedral. Listening to Unholy Cathedral by Simon Volpert for the 20-plus-year-old game Doom the Roguelike. Simon being, so a fun piece of trivia here, Simon is one of the Chaos Forge community members who've helped develop sound and music for this game that it's free to play. It's an open source free to play roguelike, and wow, I mean, for a 20-plus-year-old game with MIDI synth going on, I think this really helped. This really just like sets the tone for blasting demons in the pits of hell. I haven't spent a whole lot of time with the OG Doom, but I think just listening through some of the OG Doom soundtracks, this one just nails it. Really just nails the tone, nails the remix ability in a new and fun way, in a way that I haven't really heard of before.
Yeah, Doom has like a legendary soundtrack. A lot of the tracks, of course, famously very, very much inspired, if not semi copied, of like existing thrash metal and metal tracks in general. And this song really, lives up to those expectations. Very impressed. First time hearing of this, and really dig the MIDI sort of stand-in for guitar work and everything. Very, very good melody and track, and switched it off like during the solo. But that's okay. I think we might have another case like Colin was describing with Last Spell, where this might almost be a little too frenetic and like driving and like, fast for a turn-based game. But I mean, you gotta have this kind of music when it comes to a Doom game.
Indeed.
Pick up one of those berserk mode power-ups and woo, yeah, this is just playing. Well, to continue our theme with pipe organ music, we're gonna dial up the budget a little bit here from our previous episode, Returnal. This is Ascend the Spire. Listening to Ascend the Spire, composed by Joe Thwaites for Returnal. I think it's fair to say I'm the only one on the podcast who got this far into the game.
I think it's fair to say the only thing that we do with spires on this podcast is slay them. But maybe we can make an exception since this is a one-off episode. Yeah, I think you definitely were the only one to hear that. Which tell us about the context of this track.
Yeah, like Returnal is brutally hard. And I think like this was a moment in the game that like made it for me. Like, I had, wishy-washy things about the story, but like you play through the first 3 zones of the game and there's this kind of contextual reset of like, what is going on? There's something going on. And the music from this particular track is kind of playing in the background throughout the 4th stage, and you're like, there's this music, I gotta silence this music, it's driving me crazy. And towards the end of this level, you're ascending this big like overgrown spire, and I think in our episode I was comparing it to sort of the end of Ocarina of Time, where you're hearing this organ music, you're getting closer and closer, and it's building and building and building, and then you have this boss fight of this mutated humanoid playing the organ and shooting orbs at you out of the organ, and just like this connection between the music and like you ascending this really epic level design was just, it was such a hit home moment at that time for me of like, okay, we're assembling this episode of music. This was the first track I picked, where it was and there's a little harmonic, or there's a little 4-note motif going on in the background here that once you beat the game the first time, you're like, oh my God, what? That's where the context comes from. And it completely tips the game over on itself of this, like the context has changed completely. And when you hear the song with that new context, you're like, oh my God, like this is crazy. Everything like falls into place. It makes perfect sense. Where I think like I think we recorded that episode like 30 minutes right after I had beaten the game, and I was like, none of this makes any sense. What is like I think the music in this game, particularly for the 4th biome and that like the kind of impact that it has, is really just something that, yeah, like when I decided to put this interesting summer episode together, I thought this is the one that has to go in there. Everything else, all these other games we can cut, but this was the one that I had to ramble on the most, I think. And with that, we are going to jump into our next episode, or our next piece of music here from a traditional roguelike game. It's quite popular, called Caves of Cud. This track is called Lazarus. You are listening to the haunting track Lazarus by composer Gregory Ham for the traditional roguelike Caves of Cud. Wow, talk about two pieces just like bursting with atmosphere back to back. This, I feel like Caves of Cud has like the biggest ratio of like atmospheric drip to like turn-based tile, like borderline Atari graphics. This whole soundtrack to Caves of Cud is amazing. It is something that like I put it on par with like the Chernobyl miniseries soundtrack with like atmospheric, just you feel like you're in an alien world and an alien environment. Everything feels very overbearing and oppressive and different. And there's just something about this soundtrack that feels very like big and awe-inspiring, and not something you would think that you would get out of a top-down 2D turn-based game that looks like, you know, graphics are from like 40 years ago kind of deal.
Coming to 1.0 soon. More than just to stay tuned, we're actually like basically going to play this immediately once the 1.0 comes out. We would have already done it by now. I own it. I played a little bit of it. I'm ready to play it again for real and listen to this beautiful soundtrack.
Yeah,
This track has definitely a dungeon synth type sound to me, which I appreciate, and of course that genre is all about atmosphere. And I can even though I haven't played Caves of Quid yet, it's I can definitely imagine how that very much complements the gameplay and the graphics. Here for it.
Yeah, I think it should also be noted that this is the music that plays when you have arrived at Bethesda Souza, which is a major dungeon in the game that is like this very like oppressive, difficult, like cryogenic layer that it feels like a big dungeon, like atmospheric epic dungeon like you would see in like a really big crunchy RPG. And the fact that it's in this super low budget indie title, I think really underscores like why this game is so high quality. But yeah, let's move on to our next super indie soundtrack. We'll be playing our previous episode, Rogue Tower. This track is Orcs Attack. Listening to the continuously shredding tunes of Rogue Tower, or Orcs Attack, composed by Andrew R. Mason, the solo dev and composer for this game, from previous episode Rogue Tower. Yeah, I think in that episode, I may have had some pushback, like, yeah, the game's interface isn't super great, and I don't know if the gameplay's for me. But I love the soundtrack. Like, the second we played this, I could just see those little voxelized orcs dancing back and forth, coming into my minefield, and I just see the laser pyramids shooting and everything. I'm like, it sets me right in the game. And, the Andrew Mason, the developer of this game, so he studied applied mathematics, is a guitarist, a D&D player, and a martial artist. And I feel like that kind of eclectic skill set kind of comes in through the tunes here to some degree. I think this Rogue Tower has a lot of fun soul to it, and this kind of I don't know, it's not black metal, it's Bach metal is what I wrote down in my Google Doc. It's very similar in kind of theme to the artist Stradivarius. So
Bach metal. Yeah, absolutely. Which is all the more appropriate because, of course, lots of metal is, of course, influenced and dependent upon classical music. And yeah, somebody else here, you're not the only one, Scott, making that observation. Great minds think alike. Chim Chim here in the comments on YouTube is saying, oh yeah, Stradivarius, Black Diamond. Good song. And yeah, the orcs are attacking, and they are attacking with those blast beats. Those slightly, maybe less intense blast beats, but blast beats nonetheless. Love that double bass drum. It's good stuff. And I just want to reiterate that I don't even like tower defense games, but Rogue Tower's pretty fun.
I like that every song in the soundtrack, there is no build up in any of them. They just start off like right in the main melody, and it's like such a context clue for the game. Like, the first couple notes of each of the songs is like, okay, this is when shit, I haven't gotten the things that do shield damage yet. Okay. Oh no. Like, each of them have like such a visceral like context to them of like either you're like, I'm ready for the next thing, or I'm about to die.
Okay, our next super indie track that we have on here is a game that we haven't played yet, but a stay tuned and a half. We have, I guess, the main theme from the game Path of Acra. You're listening to the main theme, I think the title theme from the traditional roguelike that's kind of set the sub genre on fire. Path of Acra, composed by the solo developer of the game, Ulfsire. This is a game that I saw a lot of hype getting around. I'm like, yeah, I think that like the art style is kind of cool. And then I booted up and like hit with this sort of Mesopotamian, Akkadian, like dulcimer plucked string sound that is just you don't hear this in like games. And like the really like low like 1-bit style like growling of like this of this chorus, I think, like sent me back to like almost Super Metroid levels of like you have this like haunting kind of dungeon atmosphere. But I feel like this game just like sends me back in time to some like era of like 5000 BC where there were people walking around with electric dual wielding electric katanas and praying to all sorts of blood gods and stuff.
But also writing is forbidden sacred magic that's just been discovered.
Exactly, yeah. This game, I feel like I play this game on the couch on mute a lot, and I feel like I shouldn't. And this is a game that like when the developer, like for the longest time, this was just like one track that was just like repeated every 5 minutes or something. Like, this is pretty good. Like it's like so good. And then he released like a few other tracks that are like equally as dark and like maybe more brooding, if you can believe it. And I was like, oh, it's so perfect. Like, I feel like I could listen to an entire album of just this like ancient Fertile Crescent Sumerian blood god lore music.
Yeah, I was definitely digging it. I liked how, as you said, like, super like unique. It's not something you hear in a lot of songs. Like that it's just kind of chuckling to myself just because I was sort of delighted and surprised by some of the notes that were being hit. It's like, well, that's novel. That's novel. Wow, but it all works. And yeah, I like how it kind of staccato it was. And I can see that again, I don't know. It brings to mind the clacking of the keys on an old-timey keyboard playing a proper old school roguelike game.
Right. Well, speaking of old school roguelikes, our next one is possibly one of the biggest titans of the genre that I think really kind of recatapulted it out of the darkness of the 90s and into the modern era. Up next, we have the remastered main theme to Dwarf Fortress. are listening to the main theme of Dwarf Fortress, the recently remastered Kit Fox Games version, remastered with audio by Omar Dabuus, for Kit Fox. And yeah, if I had to think of what is the main theme to the genre of roguelikes, it would have to be that strummed guitar sequence from the intro to Dwarf Fortress, where even in this remaster,
where the dwarf, like, that's that little intro thing is just so burned into my brain.
Yeah, I'm very glad they left that in. But yeah, like I spent, I don't know, maybe I would guess 300 hours in the original Dwarf Fortress, where booting it up every time and hearing that main menu plucked strings theme and this remastered version with these haunting howling like minor tones of like, oh, I'm down in the mines, I'm howling away, picking at this rock salt wall. There's just a theme of again scope that you wouldn't think that would be in such a game, and of something of this legacy. So I'm really happy that the original Dwarf Fortress, I think, just had like 2 songs, and there's like 2 full albums of music for the remaster, and it's such high quality that I feel like we could just do an entire show on just that.
It alone is worth the Steam release. Although I guess every part of it is worth the Steam release. Like the graphics, the UI, and the music, each one on its own would have been like a huge compliment to the original game.
Stay tuned and a half for sure. We would not be doing our journalistic prudence if we didn't cover Dwarf Fortress at some point. Okay. Our next game is one of the most popular roguelite games that has possibly ever come out. This next game is Risk of Rain 2, and we are playing the track The Rain, formerly known as Purple. You are listening to The Rain, formerly known as Purple, composed by Chris Christodoulou for Risk of Rain 2. And wow, another game that I really cannot separate the music from the game when I'm playing it, and I have to play this game while listening to the music. Even the first Risk of Rain, composed by Chris as well, just phenomenal soundtracks for a game of, running around like an alien landscape, this big hostile environment, these bombastic guitar tunes that really set this really epic scope of your mission that you're on. I think Risk of Rain 1 was already one of my favorite video game soundtracks of all time. I think Risk of Rain 2 is even better somehow. There have been numerous times where I've been running around in this game being chased by like 100 monsters, and I just like stop to appreciate the music for a second and then just get bludgeoned to death by a giant fire-breathing lizard. So I think worth it. This game is another stay tuned and a half. Basically all of them are, but yeah, keep an eye out for this one in the future.
While listening to that track, just occurred to me, I need to take a moment to recognize and to appreciate that we are living in a golden age of video game music. Like, there's just so many good soundtracks, to the point where, I start to feel bad for these devs, because it almost feels like a requirement. It certainly almost feels like a pseudo requirement for indie games, because it's like the expectation is, oh yeah, well, obviously the soundtrack is going to be worth buying on its own, and you will, even though you're grinding this game for hours and hours and hours, you better have your podcast and your TV muted, turn that the hell off, because we got to listen to this great soundtrack. It sounds very good. I'm always down for synthy type stuff. Big fan of synth in general. Dark synth, all that jazz, and love the melody. Very melodic, very enjoyable.
Yeah, I think it adds a lot to the vibes of both of the games. The insignificance in a large landscape full of monsters that are trying to bludgeon you.
And good timing with the 40th anniversary of Prince's Purple Rain album dropping last week. Playing some Rain formerly known as Purple this week. Yeah, I think these games might not be everyone's jam, but boy, the soundtrack's sure jamming. That's for sure. All right, up next is our jammin', I guess, main menu theme. There's really only kind of one theme to this game that's remixed several times, but this is the main theme for Balatro. listening to the main theme from Balatro, composed by Louis F. And wow, yeah, I can't think... When we first played this game, previous episode, by the way, Balatro, this theme was stuck in my head for basically the whole 2 weeks before we recorded. And it was just like this inescapable presence of like, I'd be sitting there in the kitchen chopping onions and then all of a sudden humming like the main theme to this. And gosh, it's so good. And like, especially with this part where it dials down into this lower kind of like thinky, calmer section. There have been times where I've been sitting at work and trying to noodle through like a really tough puzzle, and then just thinking through this like Balatro music just comes playing on in the background. I'm like, oh yes, this is very focusing and zen-like, and how do I rearrange my cards in order to do this thing? And it's so foundational, I think, to the game, that I understand like people who can play this game on mute, and yeah, if you're playing this game like on the bus or something, but like
you should be playing with headphones and listening to music.
Yeah, you really owe it to yourself to like play through this game at least once listening to the soundtrack, I think.
I stepped away to get a beer while we were listening, and it didn't matter because once I heard the soundtrack, it just started playing in my brain, and I didn't need to hear it with my ears anymore.
Yeah, there you go. I appreciate how Balatro has... What's unique about the soundtrack is that it has this sort of psychedelic groove to it. And that is, of course, also portrayed in the art style and visuals. And, once again, we're covering a lot of songs that are, that complement the game just so wonderfully. And I assume, Scott, this is the radio edit at 19 minutes 49 seconds.
Yeah, I think the
Top 10.
Like there's a few different themes in this game. You like when you go into the shop, you open up different packs of cards, and when you're fighting bosses in this game, but it's all like roughly the same kind of theme, but like remixed in like a very intelligent way. And I feel like it really like this game has such a good thinky vibe to it, but also like a thinky funky vibe to it, like a thunky vibe. Maybe this is where Local Thunk gets his developer name from, but like, yeah, like it is so zen. That bass line is so deadly of just the like, like it is just resonating. Yeah, and I think that like, Balatro owes a lot of its success to its aesthetic, and this helps a lot. Like that, like the visual aesthetic is slam dunk. The audio is like perfect, and you see a lot of these kind of fast follow games like, oh well, Balatro is successful, maybe I could do something but Yahtzee or other like, or like a craps table version of Balatro. But does it have this kind of soul to it? Does it have this kind of like funk vibe aesthetic? Hard to say. I think this helps really, like, this is the reason why this game is so different and so unique and interesting. Well, with that, we're going to jump back to another titan of the roguelike genre. We're diving down into some depths here, way back into the past, to revisit a game that kind of kickstarted the whole new renaissance of real-time roguelite action type games. This is Yeti Caves from Spelunky. You're listening to the Yeti Caves stage from Spelunky, composed by, I'm gonna get this totally wrong, Eirik Surkey is my best guess at this, and another just super funky soundtrack. I don't know, Colin, if you or you, Andrew, have played it, but I have dumped a lot of hours into Spelunky, or in this case, Spellfunky.
Hell yeah.
And it was actually, it's good timing that Molly is trying to jump on the keyboard and meow into the microphone, because I almost can't hear this soundtrack without a lot of these stages have rescuable characters that will give you health points, and you can set it to be a pug. And so you'll hear the pug kind of like howling throughout the stage, and I'm listening to this, I'm like, what is the pug music in here? Or it's just kind of baked into my brain. So the cat making an appearance is quite apropos. Good timing. Yeah, this is another case of the soundtrack being, like, Colin, if you haven't played Spelunky, how would you describe the gameplay of this based on the soundtrack?
Well, I know you go into a cave and you go down, so I'm assuming at some point you dig your way into a jazz lounge.
That's pretty
obviously it's another rhythm game.
Yeah.
Based on this incredible track.
Smooth rhythm game, though. You're sliding everywhere on a shovel.
Absolutely. Sliding and just being, such a cool cat, dexterous, never sliding down onto some spikes or anything
or sacrificing
like that.
Your dead body onto the altar of Kali. But yeah, this is another game where like the soundtrack is like, this is a fun hip hopping kind of time, and the game being the most brutal, unforgiving take on Mario you've ever seen. Yeah, I think this is another case where the game's aesthetic and just overall great gameplay is really why it deserves so much of its success. Another game that we could spend an entire show doing the soundtrack for this one and its sequel, Spelunky 2. Very well put together. This next game that we're continuing our funk segment with, a little lesser known, definitely very crazy. This one is Feel the Rhythm, the Music Man theme from Brutal Orchestra. You're listening to Feel the Rhythm, the Music Man theme composed by Publio Delgado for Brutal Orchestra.
Well, too bad Will's not here. I mean, come on, he's got to play this game. That's right
I'm
up
pretty
his
sure
alley.
I've heard this song in his apartment. Maybe not actually, but like,
that's the ambient music just plays in his abode.
yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, this is, I usually have a jazzy intro segment to all of our podcast episodes because can't come up with a theme, so that's good enough. And compiling the playlist for this, I was like, okay, I'm definitely going to pick this game, definitely going to pick this one. What about this one? And then I started listening through the Brutal Orchestra soundtrack. I'm like, whoa, this is jazz to the max. And we are bebopping and scatting all over the place. And I almost had this one as the intro to keep that kind of jazzy intro theme going, but I had to. It just barely lost out to Vampire Survivors. This game is wild. There is not many times you hear Earthbound, roguelike, purgatory, murder, revenge in the same sentence. But you got it in spades here, and this game is all kinds of wild. Like the art and music, I think, really helped to set for such a unique gaming experience with this, and like such unique gameplay mechanics as well. Like it's almost kind of like a party-based RPG style deck builder in a way. There's a lot of weird stuff going on in this one, and I would not be shocked if we wind up covering this at some point in the future as well. But yeah, this game's whole soundtrack is just wild.
I have to play it just for the music.
We'll do an episode, yeah, where we'll just be like, well, we were gonna play it, but we got distracted by just listening to it the whole time.
Although
sure.
I'm looking at the gameplay, and I will tell you, this isn't what I expected graphics wise or just visual aesthetic wise.
Yeah, it is like a Ren and Stimpy melting, you're in like a Madame Tussauds and the heat is turned up too much, and like it is. I have to like we're here for the audio. We're not here for the visual description because this game cannot be visually described. You have to go to the Steam page and you have to be like, what on God's name is this? Okay, our next episode. Nope, we'll fix it in post. It's okay. Well, our next entry here is a familiar title to many. This is the Enter the Gungeon theme from, take a guess, Enter the Gungeon.
Dungeon wind to whisper one truth. Body the floor, bullet to roof. Ammo wheeling past, killing, gunshot shooting. Non-stop hammer, cock, violent manner, shots, man alive. Keep cannon, hot cannon, I seize granite, by peace, breast, hand, got peace, best, last man standing, gun speed, please, boss, hand.
Whoa, that is the Spit and Fire of Enter the Gungeon by American rapper Doze One for the game Enter the Gungeon.
How many roguelikes have like rap songs? And like, come on, it's too good. And what's so ingenious about this track, I feel like, is that the beginning of it like plays in the main menu, and you play the game so often, you get familiar with this main menu track, but it's not until the very end of the game, when you have a successful run, that it then starts playing right about at the 1 minute mark, which goes after a little while of like the groove they're used to, into the rap, and which at a certain point starts just like quoting the game mechanics and like quoting specific items that are like in the game, and it's just like delightful. And every time I have a successful run, a victory run, I just let it play and do a little jig around my household.
That explains why this didn't sound very familiar to me.
Indeed. But it's such a fun treat and a fun way to celebrate your successful run.
And I didn't even know, I didn't even know that there was a rap to this. When I was assembling the playout music for our previous episode of Enter the Gungeon that we covered, I just thought it was just the Enter the Gungeon like lyrics part, and then you suggested like, oh, we gotta do the rap part. I'm like, there's a rap part, and then
what?
I'm like, oh my god, there's like they actually got like a real professional rapper to do this, and like you can tell like it is like
it's got bars, that's for sure. And I ain't talking about the World War II, the rifle or heavy infantry support, whatever it's called. I don't know. Anyway, 20 bullets in the magazine. What were they thinking? It's a lot of fun. It's a good one. And it's, again, very, cathartic musically to hear that, especially the first time. Now it's been spoiled.
Well, continuing with the rare treat of lyrics at the end of victory screens in roguelike games, or rogue. Let's put this in the rogue adjacent. Honorary rogue is what I have it tagged on the site.
I take it back. It's a good thing Will's not here, so that we're not sparking off another really contentious debate.
This next track is Waiting for the Sun from RimWorld. You're listening to Waiting for the Sun, composed by Alistair Lindsay for RimWorld. This is another one that I'm not sure if I have much hope of getting to the end of to see the credit screen of being quite that skilled at RimWorld, but calling in the innumerable times that you've beaten this game, does this feel like a cathartic moment when you finally launched off of this hellish landscape?
I'm trying to remember if I think I've only beaten it once, and I don't think they had this song at the end when I beat it. I don't normally get to the end. I normally just get bored of the colony because, it's like, oh, I'm just doing some stuff. And then like the end game stuff is usually like, it's it's a slog to get to, you know, getting off the world or whatever. But yeah, I don't know.
I feel
think
I
it's
feel like the
good.
RimWorld soundtrack overall is quite calming
Yeah,
for a
I like
game
it a
that
lot.
for like a game that, you know, you're basically like staying alive by like skinning visitors who come by alive to sell their pelts to other nearby colonies.
Yeah, I do like how relatively upbeat the song is, but as you finish your run and you're reflecting on all the awful deeds that you had
All
to
the war
do.
crimes you've committed for your
Yeah.
hashish
I
farm.
mean, for all that gets
Kind of a
played up
fun
in the comments,
magic.
I rarely skinned people for human leather couches.
All right, well, continuing our space western interlude here,
Oh,
we
yeah.
are next going to the main menu theme from Lone Star. You're listening to the main menu theme from Lone Star, I think composed by Kong Yubing Sachao, with quite a number of accompanying musicians here. I'm not quite sure which of them is playing the harmonica, but woo, this is I think quite at home with something like RimWorld, where very
Yeah, that's
space
the one.
westerny kind of theme to it. And this was Will's pick, even though he's not here. This was Will's pick, is like, yes, this has to be in here. And you know, he remarked on our previous episode of Lone Star that this he thought was like the best soundtrack to any of the games that we've covered so far. So high praise on that front. And yeah, I think like this game is still in early access by the time that we're recording right now. I think it should hit 1.0 some point in 2024. But I love this vibe, like this space western harmonica bounty hunter vibe. And I really hope that there's more of this in this game and just more of this in general. I feel like it's such a good out on the edge of the galaxy, you know, you're playing your harmonica on the outside of your spaceship kind of thing. It feels very at home in this kind of aesthetic.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely were trying to make this a space western, and this is the thing that made it that. Without the soundtrack, it would have been the space western theme would have been pretty thin, but this cements it solidly as that.
100%. It's important to you know, set the tone when a game gets, you know, booted up, and it really succeeds. Just does a great job.
All right, we're rounding the corner here. We have some final boss themes to round us out. And our first boss theme for this little bit here is Leshy's theme from the game Inscription. listening to the incredibly powerful Leshy's theme from Inscription, composed by Jonah Senzel. And wow, when I booted this up, I was instantly taken back to that boss fight. And I know Andrew has not had the pleasure of playing Inscription yet, I don't think.
Yeah, I can only assume that it's a survival horror game, right? That's
you got the horror aspect.
I feel like it is
spooky
important.
track.
It's important to know the least amount possible to when you go and playing this game, except for that it is I think I have it as like a 9.5 out of 10. So it would be like top 4 games of mine.
Nice.
Of the ones we've rated.
Nice.
It's
Normally we
excellent.
say a game is a stay tuned if we're like, yeah, we'll get to it eventually. This is a game that we are getting to this season because
Ooh, I don't know. We'll have to talk about this. I don't know if we should review it. I don't think that we should talk about it because I don't think anyone should hear things about it before they play it.
It's a cognito hazard. Yeah,
well, we'll publish the episode and then we'll lock it down so that way no one can actually hear it. This is Inscription for those in Andrew's position is a game that it's a roguelike deck builder, but there's so many interesting aspects to it that if someone told you about him, it would ruin the surprise. So if nothing else, I'm excited to see what Andrew's reaction to those things from a fresh perspective would be. And
that's fair.
And this boss fight that you encounter in the game is so tense and so atmospheric and so artistically done that, like, up until this point, like it's a very different game, and then this hits and it's everything starts spinning on its head, and it is like you hear this in the music with some of the motifs written back for some of the mini bosses that you fight, and it is just so perfectly tied together for that atmospheric horror vibe. And then after you beat the game, much like Returnal, you beat the game and you come back to it with this renewed sense of context, and you're like, obviously the less said the better here, but yeah, keep an eye out for the soundtrack to appear later this season. All right, our next boss fight is quite a boss fight from roguelikes in general. This next piece of music is The Last Stand from FTL, Faster Than Light. You're listening to The Last Stand from FTL Faster Than Light, composed by Ben Prunty, who also did the soundtrack to the other subset games, game Into the Breach, both FTL and Into the Breach previous episodes. And boy, this boss fight. This is some boss fight music. Maybe one of like the titular. I keep saying this about all the games. Like, this has such a perfect boss fight theme where you are the lowly Federation ship building up your crew and building up your weapons to finally take on the rebel flagship at the end. And I can't think of a better like Titanic showdown music of just like pause. Let me think for a second. Where do I want my fired laser to go to cause maximum damage? But I gotta watch out for the hacking drones. Like, this is you are on the bridge of the starship and you are having to enact all of your tactics and all of your defense strategies. Your shields are at maximum. It's just such a perfect final boss fight theme.
Oh yeah, in my case, it's like that alternate timeline in Star Trek Next Gen where like the Borg have taken over and and Riker's got like a big Grizzly Adams beard and Worf is hanging out and he looks pretty normal. But anyway, we've covered a lot of songs that it's like, oh well, I haven't gotten to that part yet because it's too far out of the game. I've definitely gotten to this part. I've lost every time, and it has been The Last Stand for me. So it is very apropos.
I feel like the only thing that this soundtrack is missing, or this version is missing, is that of like the missile
klaxon
alarm. Like, it's deeply ingrained in my brain that is part of this song, and it's not. It's a warning, but like it triggers that sound in my head. Missiles incoming.
Warning, intruders aboard. The sound of the doors opening and you're trying to put out all the fires on your ship and trying to launch missiles. And the theme is so good for how much of an epic Last Stand showdown it really is. It's just so perfect. Like all of the Ben Prunty tunes from FTL and Into the Breach are just so on point. And I think in our Into the Breach episode we mentioned that we didn't have like an epic Titanic showdown of like a 1v1 super battle, and this is it. This is possibly the boss fight. But we can't go an episode of the show without referencing Slay the Spire somehow. And if Will was here, he would say, well, you think the FTL final boss is a final boss. This next one is maybe the final boss of maybe all roguelikes. This is this next track is The Heart from Slay the Spire. You are listening to The Heart from Slay the Spire, composed by Clark Abood. I am not good at Slay the Spire. I have only just really gotten to the point of collecting 3 keys that you need for a run in order to get to the heart. And it baffles me. It astounds me that people can get to this super colossal epic boss fight that you have no hope of winning on a difficulty level that is just like so painful that I can't even begin to imagine the skill required to beat the heart on Ascension 20. That Will is just like, yeah, it's no problem. What's the deal? And this music, I think, is just the boss fight music for this game that like you get to like the end of an act boss. Like, yeah, that was okay. This is boss music, capital B boss. The big thumping horn segments. It just thumps with the rhythm of just a giant demon heart that is just gonna pound you pound you out of the realm of mortals, and send you flying down to the ground to talk to the sentient whale all over again.
Well, and it does the thing that I love about boss fight music, which is take the main theme or one of the main themes or all the motifs from all the other things and just mash them together and turn them to 11. It's like, oh yeah, it's the culmination of things. And I mean, I feel like most boss music does that, but I really like when they do it. And I think this does a good job of it. It is
a great trick, absolutely. It's that culmination of the game, and that includes the soundtrack. And for my brain, like when I'm like listening to music, I'm generally speaking, I'm enjoying a particular track at maximum when I have listened to it a number of times and it has had time to sort of percolate and marinate in my brain. And so you when you call upon those melodies and those themes from earlier in the game, you are sort of delving into that and using that resource. It's like, oh, this is sure to be a catchy, good tune for the player because their brain already kind of knows it. And this is very bombastic, not in a bad way, but very, very dramatic and exciting. And this is like, AAA, big budget, blockbuster music type of a sound. I can dig it.
It is the Ascension 20 of roguelike music. Well, you'll notice, I guess that kind of wraps up our summer music fest episode. You'll notice that this recording isn't quite done yet. We still have some listener emails that we'll be reading through after this is wrapped up. So stay tuned for that if you are still awake. But yeah, for the purpose of our summer beach jams, we'll wrap this up in sort of the usual way. If you want to get in contact, grogpodzone@gmail.com is the email address. Grogpod.zone is the website with all of our stuff, and we're on Mastodon with tens of other people. Mastodon or grogpod@gamedev.place. You can find all that stuff. Write in. Send us some stuff for our next letter episode. And our next episode that we'll be covering is a listener request week. It is our 50th game that we will be reviewing, and actually 50th and 51st because we're doing a 2-for-1. We've talked a lot about great games and great game music, and you've heard our next episode here earlier. We're going to be revisiting the timeless classic Doom the Roguelike, DoomRL, and its modern remaster by the same developer, Jupiter Hell. So keep an eye out for that for our next episode. And so to play out this part of this, we'll get you in the mood for Doom with some 90s demon hunting inspired tunes from our theremin heavy Hades. And playing us out this week will be the track King and the Bull from Hades, composed by Darren Cord. Okay, and if you are still listening to the podcast, we have some listener letters to go through. First off, thanks people for considering to write into a video game podcast and have us talk about it. We got some interesting stuff in here to talk through, I think. So let's just jump right into it. This first letter we got from our Risk of Rain episode. Go on to say, I found out about the pod and am going back currently. I appreciate that y'all let someone share that they don't like the game. I'm about to go for another attempt on Risk of Rain, and I remembered not getting why people liked it so much in the past. It is acceptable for people not to have a game click for them, and it is good to hear opinions from all sides on what makes a game good or fun. I just had the Google Docs thing pop up and I have to restart.
Yeah.
And that is from our listener, Cheese Cola. Thanks, Mr. or Mrs. Cheese, for writing in. And yeah, I wanted to include this one specifically because I think there's a lot of games that we talk about, and not every one of them is going to be a slam dunk. And yeah, like the wise words of Cheese Cola, that's perfectly acceptable.
Or even if they are a slam dunk, maybe they're not a slam dunk for everyone.
That's true.
Like, there are definitely games that Will has liked and I haven't liked, and more vice versa.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, it's a tough trick for a game to pull off, where it's like, oh, you gotta please all four hosts. That's not gonna happen. Four hosts with wide variety of tastes. And of course, I mean, clearly this email is specifically complimenting Will. So it's a shame that he's not here again.
Well, yeah, and I think that like there's also some mea culpa as a host here, trying to spread the good word of the pod into some places where it's like, hey, we didn't like this game, but come listen to us talk about it. Which I've dialed back significantly. I remember there was this one game developer somewhere who was saying like, I love hearing people talk about this game that I've developed, regardless if they like it or not, because people are still talking about it. And I was like, oh, I wonder, if that rings true for communities. And I don't actually think that's true for communities anymore. But but yeah, I think that like after our Lone Star episode, I think we were kind of like neutral positive on Lone Star. I went into the Lone Star Discord and shared our episode saying like, hey, I think we generally liked it. And one of the posters there said, I'm like 30 minutes through the episode. When do you guys get to start talking about something positive here? And I just felt like a huge jerk. Like, I've like infiltrated these safe spaces for these communities, because a lot of
jump through the emoji hoops required to get into the Discord, and you're not a bot, and then
I read the server rules. But yeah, like I think a lot of these games are communities, and a lot of the communities you go to for games are people who are diehard fans. So yeah, of course, like if you post something, I remember our Shattered Pixel Dungeon episode got a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was actually gonna say that's been our worst offender, because we didn't like it and people really like that game. So
yeah. And they're like, I think, to be clear, our aggregate rankings have it as kind of like, it's in the middle of the pack. And for people who have put 1,000 hours into a game, they'd be like, you only kind of like it. But yeah, I think the immortal words of Cheese Cola, it's good to hear opinions from all sides on what makes a game good.
Indeed.
Good or
Cheese
fun.
Cola, thank you. You're a true gentle person and a scholar. And sometimes it feels kind of bad mouthing a game or speaking negatively about a game. So it's good to hear that listeners such as yourself find that valuable. And I agree. A variety of opinions makes for a better discussion, of course.
Yeah, it'd be super boring if we just this game is great. Yep, this game is great. All right. All right, let's move on to our next letter. We got a whole bunch of stuff here still. This one is from our Star of Providence podcast episode. This one reads, hey, ya fellas, it's Nick, one of the two guys from the Upgrade Terminal podcast, Star of Providence podcast. First of all, Huge thanks for the shout out at the end of the episode there. Very much appreciated as someone who makes an extremely niche thing, one niche thing podcaster to another. Secondly, thank you for giving more attention and discussion about Star of Providence. Love it to pieces. The podcast was a lot of fun. It's always interesting to get a new perspective, especially from those outside the community. I didn't intend to have a theme here, but they go on to say it's refreshing to get that every so often. I'm glad you all enjoyed the game. Thirdly, yes, there is more content in the work, new stuff, rebalancing, perhaps some quality of life stuff that's coming with the Nintendo Switch version. Coming someday, hopefully before Silksong. That's where my expectations are. Anyway, cheers. And that is from Nick, from one half of the Upgrade Terminal Star of Providence podcast. Well, yes, thank you, Nick. As it turns out, the Star of Providence Switch release is slated for February 2025. So
almost certainly before Silksong.
Yeah, if the century begins with a 2, it's gonna be before Silksong. So yeah, I'm excited. I think that when I first played Star of Providence, I'm like, yeah, this game is amazing. And then DLC came out for it. I'm like, wow, this is even more amazing. Like, look at all this extra stuff they added. So I'm super excited to see what more they have coming down the pipe.
Indeed, I've been actively playing it quite a bit recently, actually. It is a lot of fun, and hey, more content, outstanding. And I commend Nick and his crew for having such a specific podcast. That is, I really admire that.
I don't remember the shout out. Scott, had you like found their podcast and listened to them in just as a way to like get tips or something?
Yeah, I mean it's a podcast with a ton of content for one single game, and I have to doff my hat at them for being so in depth for so long on it. And it was very helpful for me to understand like more about the game and like tips and things and like speedrunning communities and like, oh my God, I had no idea that like you could do this very like crucial thing in the game. And yeah, it was just like super in-depth and eye-opening. And I think I put it at the end of that episode as like a part of the more to explore bit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So like here's some similar games, and if you love this Star of Providence episode that we did, go check out these guys for 30 more hours of content on it.
Outstanding. Well, hopefully some of those 30 hours has some tips and tricks on the hacking minigame, because I am still, after like 25 hours of playing this game, so bad at it. I just lose.
That hacking minigame is like the most stressful experience in like like all the Elden Ring I've been playing recently, and like, boy, this isn't the Star of Providence hacking game, at least.
I imagine it gets easier once you like understand immediately when you see the puzzle, but this like frantic, like, what is this puzzle? Trying to understand it. Oh God, I've already used half the time.
Yeah, I'd be like one of those gorillas at the computer monitor that like is pressing all the buttons super fast.
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, thanks, Nick. Our next letter here is from our Enter the Gungeon episode. Listener writes in to say, thanks for the fun discussion as always. Seems like the consensus among you guys is that Gungeon's a very roll the die and get good with what you have affair. I can see how the RNG-dependent gameplay, lack of strategic agency, is a downside for some of you. But to offer an alternative point of view, which I think Scott or Andrew touched on, I actually kind of like that about Gungeon and some other roguelikes. To me, it feels like spinning a wacky wheel of fortune, think Dream Machines in the Yakuza games, or dipping your hand into a mystery grab bag of toys. There's an excitement and anticipation in what guns I'll get in this chest. And I might get a boring or ineffective gun, or something that I can't use at all, but that just means I can pat myself on the back for taking on Gungeon with a lesser loadout. I guess that's the difference between a glass half full and glass half empty mindset. I also look at the availability of strategic agency in another light. If I don't have the choices to strategize from, that's one less layer of thinking I have to do. I'm lazy and I don't have the mental energy to strategize after a long day. Sympathize there. I can live with pulling the lever on a slot machine and feeling jazzed about whatever reward I get, awesome or lame. Honestly, these 2 points may be the core reasons why I love this genre. Maybe I'm just a foolish gambler at heart. I probably shouldn't ever go to casinos. and that's from Rel, I think is what they go by. Yeah, I think like this is like the time honored debate with a lot of stuff is like how do you balance between randomness but not too much random? And I don't quite know where that balancing act is. And in some cases, you can have things like we already talked about our Risk of Rain episode, but the Risk of Rain series has this where you go in, you open a chest, and it's like, here's some random thing. But there's options that you can make it so when you open the chest, now I can pick from anything, and you have the option to actually strategically build your loadout as an option you can unlock later. So yeah, I'm kind of curious from the peanut gallery here, like where do we think the balancing point is between like maybe like good random and bad random?
Yeah, I wish we. Sorry. I wish we had like a date that we had done these podcasts on here, because I feel like this was one of the earlier ones that we had done. Yeah. Like this was back when Andrew was still just a guest on the
Indeed,
podcast, if I
it's
remember
true.
correctly.
My recollection is that Woody and I were like very kind of pro the level of randomization, and that's when like Hades came up, and how y'all were discussing, well, what's great about Hades is that at the end of a room you get those options so that you can try to build towards a particular build.
Yeah, I think if I might, like, I have not listened to this podcast or this episode since it came out, so my bet would be that if I went back and listened to it now, I would probably say that I've learned more about myself as a gamer since then. And it's probably just that I don't like top-down shooters, and there was nothing, the randomness plus or minus is not the part of it that I was dissatisfied with.
That's not your biggest concern. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Sure. I guess the tricky bit about randomness is like when you are surprised and delighted by some RNG, then of course it's great. But you can't have that, without the bad, without getting stuck with, which actually can be a source of entertainment sometimes when you get really just done dirty by the algorithm, by the RNG. Indeed, it is one of the great questions of our time, and it's tough to say exactly how to find that balance, but there are certain games that are able to do it, and some games lean into one or the other, and that's okay too.
Yeah, I guess maybe like blending into our next letter a little bit. I remember I was listening to something and someone made a very like I was listening to another video game podcast. Don't listen to them, listen to us. And they were making the point that like games with high degrees of randomness should be shorter. And that like a longer game, like the randomness becomes more like punishing. And I was like, oh, I gotta stop my walk here and take a note down in my phone, because I was like, yes, this feels very on point with this. Where like I feel like Gungeon is short enough where, if like you get some random thing that's just like, yeah, this is gonna probably be a run killer here, but it's a silly banana, or it's something that like probably doesn't work. Let's see how far I can go with it. I'm dead. Yeah, okay, I can start another run, before dinner's ready, kind of a deal. But if it's like, you're like 30 hours into this super epic RPG and you're down to your last life, and you got the dice roll to go, and comes up Snake Eyes, and you're like, well, that was 30 hours.
Yeah, XCOM.
Yeah,
the thing that pops into my mind. It's like, oh yeah, take that 85% shot. Oh, you miss. Oh, I guess I just lose this guy who've been like carefully shepherding through 30 hours of gameplay. And now I have to make the decision of like, do I actually like try and like save Scum? I haven't yet in this whole campaign. Like I'm doing a fake Iron Man. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe another component with that is like luck is probably fine, or like randomness is probably fine for those longer games, as long as you have like a randomness mitigation method of like, yes, here's more randomness, but here are more ways to like more strategies or like things you can do to like plus or minus the pips of the die, or like increase your odds of rolling such that, yeah, like, oh, I have an 80% chance of getting this final hit at the final boss. But here's like all these potions and things that I can use to like up that to like 110%. And then that way it's like, okay, like I have some kind of luck mitigation strategies maybe.
Yeah. I
Here,
agree.
here. Indeed.
Yep.
Luck mitigation
Yes.
is important. And I think someone, one of our listeners wrote in to discuss that topic. I think it's been discussed a little bit previously. And yeah, I agree also.
All right, we've been running a little long here. Let's wrap this up. Our last letter here from our favorite letter writer, titled "How long do you like your gameplay?" They say someone mentioned gameplay length, particularly in regards to just how long Tales of Maj'Al's Age of Ascendancy campaign, the default one, was, and what is just quote too long. I've played a decent amount of roguelikes / roguelites and see their length run the gauntlet quite a bit. In general, I see them in 4 distinct categories. Game runs of less than 2 hours, think Spelunky, Cardinal Quest, and quite a few 7-day roguelike game dev jam projects. These games are quite short or have runs that will be done and over very quickly. Usually you can pick them up easily, your coffee break roguelikes kind of thing. You have 2 to 5 hour game runs. Insert FTL, Faster Than Light, Dungeon of the Endless, Jupiter Hell in this bracket. You might come back to these over a few coffee breaks, but they are likely games you would sit down and play through and start to finish in your average afternoon. 5 to 12 hour game runs, looking at beefy stuff like Unexplored and Castle of the Winds now. While for other brackets, you could theoretically get away with not having a save button, you'll likely need it at this point. I also find these games tend to require you to keep playing them too. Otherwise, you'll forget how to play your games if you come back to them after too long. And then game runs of more than 12 hours. Obviously, you just played Tales of Maj'Al, but Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup can also be mentioned as another very long game. The standards for many old school roguelikes, they're just long. I'm personally finding that 12 plus hour length roguelikes are becoming harder to play as free times becomes scarcer to find. Games that are less than 2 hours might be fine to play on my mobile, but I wouldn't want to sit down at a PC to play such a game. I personally like those games that are in the 5 to 12 hour range, but I actually don't come across such games that often. Thoughts? ? That is from our good pal Davian.
Hey, writing in again, repeat writer. What a deal. Good stuff. Sorry it took so long for us to get to this question. Tome was a while ago. I feel like I think we can all agree that the perfect length is a bus ride back from work. Right, Scott?
I think, well, yes and no. I think it depends. Yeah, I mean, like I am the poster child of like the person on the Steam. Oh, you see these people all the time with their Steam Decks on the bus, you know,
Classic.
kind of a thing. And yeah, I think that our 4 categories of like games less than 2 hours, 2 to 5, 5 to 12, and 12 plus. I think like in terms of like bite siziness, you have, well, there's so many layers here because it's like you have how long does it take for you to complete like the little puzzle that you're currently interacting with, and then there's like the broader puzzle. And so for something like FTL, you have like your bite-sized like in the moment puzzle of like, oh, I'm fighting this other ship. But your broader overarching puzzle is, building up your ship and navigating through the different sectors to fight the final boss at the end. And, like Slay the Spire, kind of a similar idea. But like, you might have, and that like run length, that overarching thing is a much longer entity versus, your individual fight might last a few minutes at most. And so,
I
think
the unit of roguelike is a run. So
sure,
like from the beginning of game till death or victory. So like for FTL, that's what, like 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think I'm pretty solidly in the like just below 2 hours to 4 or 5 hours as my sweet spot of roguelikes. I'm just looking at the games that I have high on my list, and I think a lot of them end up with runs that are in that like 2 or 3 hour range at most. I kind of agree with the like 12 plus hour games. I feel like my experience with them starts being that they're not roguelike for me because I played one run or 2 runs, in which case, yeah, they might have a lot of replayability, but I won't experience that. So whatever I happen to do, like Tales of Majayal, I basically had 2 runs. So that has been my experience, is that it is an RPG.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's not true. I know that's not how people who are really into the game experience it. But you know, if it, unless it's like a game that really grabs me, I'm not going to play enough to get that variation in it. So like I like having them be short enough that I can feel the randomness, the roguiness, without having to play 50 hours to see that.
Oh, Andrew, you're muted.
Oh, I've made it so many episodes without doing that. Heavens to Betsy. Well, such is life. I got a loud keyboard over here and a couple of loud cats. Trying to play it safe. So I'm trying to remember correctly. Is Will's perfect run number is it 90 minutes?
Yeah.
90 minutes. I think
what he
that's
said.
I think that is pretty good, a pretty good rule of thumb, kind of to start with, and then you can maybe go up a little bit, maybe go down a bit. For me personally, yeah, it's that's a great point that you're bringing up, Colin. That it's if it is super long, that you're not going to be able to enjoy that meaningful randomness that is so important to me in a roguelike experience. So yeah,
Andrew, how long was, I think you've played the most Last Spell of us. How long is a single city in Last Spell?
Oh boy. Well, let me tell you. So the DLC's out, and I've been playing that. And yeah, it's still very long. I'm trying to remember. Oof. I want to say like 3-ish hours, maybe.
Yeah.
And I play with I have like the turbo mode set to like only like double, and I don't have it on all the time, so maybe I'm not like, you know, the average player.
I feel like
yeah,
that was my peak of like, this is about as long as I want for something that feels like you're supposed to do it over and over and over again.
totally, for sure. And to be fair to that game, there's maybe not as much randomized content to be experienced, so perhaps that specifically is not detriment. But we discussed it at length during the show.
Yeah. I mean, I picked that one because that's one of the, I was just looking at the games in my top 10.
Oh, got you.
It's my number 9, and I think that's the one with the longest run.
That's the
outside of RimWorld, which doesn't really count. RimWorld is one of those games that's in the 12 plus hour, and it's like, I have experienced as a roguelike because I've put in hundreds of hours, but you two probably have not really experienced it as a roguelike in the same
way. There's an interesting element of like, how long is too long? Like, what's my attention span kind of length? Where, you know, if I feel like with roguelike games in general, there's your beginning, middle, and end of a run. And like, if you're spending like a whole week and you haven't really experienced the end game like that much, and you're expected to do this like over and over, like you better like that game, right? Yeah. And for the record, like I enjoyed my time with The Last Spell. I thought it was just like maybe too much of a good thing, where it was like, you know, if these rounds were like half as long, I feel like I would enjoy it twice as much because I'd be able to get to experience it like quicker. Sure. One, you know, I guess one positive or a good thing to say about like Monster Train with like its turbo mode, where it's just like, it's so like comedically fast, where it's just like all the monsters just like this like blur of mutilation that goes on the screen. But it's great because like, oh, I can do like a whole run of that in like an afternoon and be like, all right, yep, I know exactly what I'm getting into and what I expect for the end game next time I play it. Whereas like if I've only ever experienced like the mid game once for something, like I don't really know what's around the corner and I have to invest a lot of time to get to that point. So even something like Tales of Majayal, I think like Caves of Cud is also particularly bad at this. Is like these games that were like their scope is so big, but like yeah, like we're literally just talking about like an RPG at that point, and you know,
Find out next time when we do Kids of the Cud.
Next time,
probably not
yeah.
actual next time, but someday. Stay tuned.
Next time soon. Yeah, soonish. Not next week. 2 weeks.
But yeah, I think that'll wind up our listener letter segment for our summer music fest. So thanks for writing in, folks. But yeah, as we kind of alluded just now, but also earlier in the show, our next episode will be a double feature for our big 50th game that we've reviewed so far. We're covering Doom the Roguelike and its modern remastered Jupiter Hell. So I was always surprised to find out how popular DoomRL was with such a huge variety of people. So I'm super excited to cover that one, and particularly with like it being remastered with like actual graphics and stuff by the same developer. So be a great conversation. Tune in for that next time. Yeah, we'll see you then.